Motherfucker! Greetings. I'm back with an all new album rankings episode. It's been 2 weeks, so I want to get started with episode 31, which is me ranking all of AC/DC's studio albums. For this list, I'm excluding one of their albums that wasn't released worldwide, which is TNT, and replacing it with Who Made Who, which was not really a studio album, but it was actually a soundtrack of their hit songs, and that was for the soundtrack for the movie Maximum Overdrive. AC/DC was an Australian rock band formed in 1973, founded by the brothers Malcolm and Angus Young. Their current lineup comprises of the Angus Young, bassist Cliff Williams, drummer Phil Rudd, singer Brian Johnson, and the nephew of Angus and Malcolm Young, Stevie Young. Their music has been variously described as hard rock, blues rock, and heavy metal, but the band simply calls it rock and roll. They are cited as a formative influence on the new wave of British heavy metal bands such as Def Leppard and Saxon. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003. AC/DC went through several lineup changes before releasing High Voltage in 1975, which was released exclusively in Australasia. Membership subsequently stabilized after the release of Let There Be Rock in 1977, with the Young brothers Rudd, Williams, and Bon Scott on lead vocals. 7 months after the release of Highway to Hell in 1979, Bon Scott died of alcohol poisoning, and the other members considered disbanding. However, at the request of Scott's parents, they continued on. They recruited a British singer by the name of Brian Johnson as the new frontman, and their first album with him was 1980's Back in Black. Dedicated to Scott's memory, it became the second best-selling album of all time. As usual, when you're done watching this video, you can go back and check out past album rankings episodes. The playlist is in the description box. And now it's time to get on with the video. Let's begin with number 17 with Fly on the Wall. It was released in July of 1985. Other than Shake Your Foundations, none of the songs off this album stood out. It reached number 35 on the Billboard 200. Fly on the Wall hit rock bottom for them until they would meet Stephen King to provide the soundtrack for his film Maximum Overdrive. Next, in 16th place, is Flick of the Switch. This album saw AC/DC's popularity take a nosedive. Instead of keeping Mutt Lange at the helm to produce, they decided to self-produce this one, and it led to disastrous results. A critical and commercial failure. While I dig tracks like Guns for Hire, Nervous Breakdown, Rising Power, and the title track, something about this album screamed failure, despite going platinum and reaching number 15 on the Billboard 200. In 15th place is Who Made Who. Now, this is not a studio album, but a soundtrack to a movie called Maximum Overdrive, which was directed by author Stephen King. Every song was recorded from a 10-year period, from January of 76 to December of 85. The only original song on this one is, of course, Who Made Who. Since its release, it went 5 times platinum and reached number 33 on the Billboard 200. Never mind how it did on the international charts. Next, in 14th place, it's Rock or Bust, released in November of 2014. Rock or Bust saw the debut of the Young brothers' nephew Stevie Young, which replaced Malcolm, the founding member of AC/DC, who was battling dementia at the time, which ended up taking his life 3 years later. It made it to the US top rock tracks at number 1, and made it to number 3 on the Billboard 200. Unfortunately, a lot of things had happened by the time they hit the road. Drummer Phil Rudd got in trouble with the law. Brian Johnson was forced to stop touring due to hearing loss. Thankfully, Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses stepped in and filled in for him for the remainder of the tour. And Cliff Williams decided to call it quits. That didn't take long. because he would be back a few years later. It was bad. It was a bad time to be an AC/DC fan with such bad news. The only song that really stood out was Let's Play Ball. Next. In 13th place is High Voltage. This was the album that started it off for AC/DC, released in their home country in Australia back in '75, but then got an international release with a different track list in '76. This album was initially dismissed by the US audience before Highway to Hell and Back in Black came out. Until Highway to Hell and Black sold extremely well, High Voltage went triple platinum as of this recording. As far as the tracks, It's a Long Way to the Top, Can I Sit Next to You Girl, The Jack and TNT, all stood out for this album. In 12th place is Stiff Upper Lip, released in February of 2000. Stiff Upper Lip would be the last AC/DC album to be produced by the Young brothers' older brother George, who would die in 2017, a month before Malcolm Young passed away. Stiff Upper Lip, Satellite Blues, and Safe in New York City were all released as singles. Were standout tracks as well on this album. It had gone platinum in the States and made it to number 7 on the Billboard 200. This record was not at the level as The Razor's Edge or Back in Black, in my opinion. What is yours? In 11th place is Power Edge, released in 1978. This was the first to feature Cliff Williams on bass, replacing Mark Evans. Most of the songs of this record were written by the Young brothers and Bon Scott. The ones that stood out were Gone Shootin', Sin City, and Rock and Roll Damnation. I was not too keen on this album at all, and I mean that with all due respect. Since its release, it reached number 133 on the Billboard 200 and went platinum. In 10th place is Power Up, their most recent studio record, released on Friday, November 13th, 2020. It reached number 1 in 21 countries, including the US, the third AC/DC album to make it to the top of the US charts, produced by Brendan O'Brien, who had produced past AC/DC albums such as Black Ice and Rock or Bust. But he also produced albums with bands such as Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, and nu metal acts such as Limp Bizkit and Korn. Power Up served as a tribute to Malcolm Young, who passed away in 2017. He got posthumous songwriting credits for all the songs on this record. The songs that stood out were Shot in the Dark, Demon's Fire, Witch's Spell, Through the Mist of Time, and Realize. As of this recording, AC/DC had finally embarked on their Power Up tour, but unfortunately Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd were replaced by Matt Logg and Chris Chaney as touring members. In 9th place is Let There Be Rock, released in July of '77 in the United States. This record was the last to feature Mark Evans on bass before he was ultimately replaced by Cliff Williams. Let There Be Rock cracked the top 20 in their home country of Australia, going 5 times platinum, while it went double platinum in the US. Whole Lotta Rosie, Problem Child, Bad Boy Boogie, and Let There Be Rock were all standout tracks. In 8th place is Blow Up Your Video, released in February of 1988. Thanks to Who Made Who, Blow Up Your Video regained AC/DC's popularity, as this album reached number 2 in the UK, number 12 in the United States, and also went platinum. Heat Seeker and That's the Way I Wanna Rock and Roll are the only standout tracks for this fine piece of recording, but they have yet to scratch the surface as far as multi-platinum status went. Getting back to multi-platinum status, I meant. They would accomplish that on their next record, which would be released in 1990. In 7th place is Ball Breaker, released in September of 1995. Ball Breaker reunited AC/DC with drummer Phil Rudd, who last played on 1983's Flick of the Switch. Dearly noted that Simon Wright played on Fly on the Wall and, of course, Blow Up Your Video, while Chris Slade played drums on The Razor's Edge. Ball Breaker reached number 1 in Australia, number 6 in the UK, and number 4 in the US, while also reaching double platinum there. Much like Back in Black 15 years earlier, most of the songs stood out, but the ones that were singles actually stood out, like Hard as a Rock, Cover You in Oil, and Hail Caesar. Marvel Comics contributed to Ball Breaker's artwork, and this is the only AC/DC record to be produced by Rick Rubin. At number 6 is Black Ice. Released on October 17, 2008, and produced by Brendan O'Brien. Black Ice is the last studio record to feature founding member Malcolm Young, who left AC/DC in the fall of 2014 while battling dementia, which he ultimately succumbed to 3 years later. Black Ice reached number 1 in the US, the second AC/DC album to reach that goal, as well as 21 other countries. I find this record to be in the same category as Stiff Upper Lip, which was not on a level as past records such as Back in Black or The Razor's Edge, but nonetheless, songs like Anything Goes, Big Jack, War Machine, and Rock and Roll Train all stood out, and still Black Ice continued the trend of successful albums by this legendary. In 5th place is For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. The third and final AC/DC album produced by Mutt Lange, unleashed on the world on November 20th, 1981. This album earned them their first number 1 album in the US, an accomplishment they wouldn't reach until 2008's Black Ice and then later 2020's Power Up. The title track and cuts like Evil Walks and Spellbound were the only tracks that stood out for me. Since its release, the album sold 4 million in the US, which was a major drop in record sales at the time, but nonetheless, still a successful record overseas. In 4th place is Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Initially released in 1976 in their home country of Australia, the rest of the world will not get to hear Dirty Deeds until 1981, following the success of Back in Black. The album, initially the Aussie version, reached the top 5 on the Australian charts, while the international release made it to number 3 in the US, going 6 times platinum. The title track, Big Balls, Rocker, and Problem Child were all standout tracks. Again, Problem Child, what the fuck. In 3rd place is Highway to Hell. Released on July 27th, 1979. Highway to Hell was the first of 3 records produced by Robert John Mutt Lange. The other 2 were Back in Black and the aforementioned For Those About to Rock. Sadly, this would be the final album for singer Bon Scott, as he passed away from alcohol poisoning on February the 19th, 1980. Since its release, it sold 7 million in the United States and cracked the top 20 on the Billboard 200. In 2nd place is The Razor's Edge, released on September 24th, 1990. The Razor's Edge marked a huge commercially successful comeback for AC/DC. Thanks to songs like Thunderstruck, Money Talks, Are You Ready, and Mistress for Christmas, along with others, it reached number 2 on the Billboard 200 in the States, going 5 times platinum in the US, Canada, and in Australia. As of this recording, the record has sold 18.8 million globally. It ranks right up there as one of AC/DC's highest selling albums, behind the next one. In 1st place, was there ever any doubt, Back in Black? The biggest hard rock heavy metal album ever made was released on July 25th, 1980 in the US, July 31st in the UK and the rest of Europe, and August 11th, 1980 in Australia. I covered this album on episode 28 on my album review series. You can go check that out yourself. The album sold 22 million in the US, and the rest of the world sold like 50 million. I rated Back in Black 10 out of 10. The album was an all-black cover, showed a sign of mourning for Bon Scott. It was a very unique tribute to a fallen rock star indeed. Back in Black hit number 1 in Australia, their home country, and in the UK, while reaching number 4 in the United States. Every song in this album actually stood out, from Hell's Bells to Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. Here is a quick recap of all the albums from AC/DC I ranked worst to best. Now, to be fair, I said that Who made this list, while the Australian album TNT didn't, because Who was released internationally as a soundtrack to the movie Maximum Overdrive, so don't beat me up in the comments, okay? Fly on the Wall and Flick of the Switch happen to be their worst records to date, while The top three were Highway to Hell, The Razor's Edge, and Back in Black. The greatest albums they ever put out in their 50-year career, in my humble opinion. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. This has been Joel Ohm's Album Rankings, episode 31.